Hi, I'm Jamie, and you're watching ComicsVerse. I'm here with Adam Warren. Adam, how are you enjoying the second day of Special Edition?
It's been very nice, actually. Very cool show. Kind of a little sedate today, which is kind of how I like a second day of a two-day show to go. So, enjoying it quite a bit, actually.
So I know one of your big comics is Empowered. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what it's about, or a little about it, and then about why you wrote it?
It's Empowered is a sexy superhero comedy, except when it isn't, as it does vary in tone a fair bit, about the misadventures of a C-list superheroine and her kind of struggles in the often problematic and difficult world of being a superhero in a typically insane kind of superhero universe. And it's about her sort of her struggles with, because basically basically Emp has to wear a incredibly embarrassing alien supersuit, which is a bit of a problem for someone with self-esteem and body image issues, wearing this sort of grotesquely revealing costume, to get her superpowers from, and it's kind of about her conflicts with that, and it's a way of actually using the kind of superhero metaphor as an overall kind of standing in for kind of real life. I don't really get into her civilian identity, because the idea is that her job as a crappy superhero represents having like a crappy job in the real world, or a job that you thought would be awesome, and it turns out to kind of suck in a lot of ways. And in some ways it's autobiographical, I suppose, since comics can be an often difficult field to work in, and it sometimes reflects some of my issues with my chosen field. But I hope overall it's a positive experience for for the reader. So
speaking of the world of comics, how did you get involved in the world of comics?
I went to the Joe Kubert School of Cartoon and Graphic Arts in New Jersey after being influenced by the comic scene of the 80s, like Alan Moore on Swamp Thing, American Flag by Howard Chaykin in the 80s, kind of blew my mind at the time and got me into the idea of doing comics for a living. So I went out to there, and it was there that I encountered manga, the burgeoning anime and manga field in the mid 80s, and that kind of blew my mind even more, and I decided that I encountered the Japanese characters, the Dirty Pair, which is my previous kind of long-term project before Empowered, and when I was in school I decided that would make a great kind of American comic. And through a kind of long chain of unlikely coincidences, I actually me and my late friend Torrin Smith ended up being able to do an original English adaptation of the characters, and that was kind of my entree into the field as a whole. And it kind of blew up from there, and I've pretty much been doing the same thing the day I got out of school to what I'm doing today. So I overall was kind of had a lot of good fortune to kind of be able to do the kind of things I wanted to do when I wanted to do them. So very few people actually get that lucky with their introduction to comics. That most people have. I mean, pretty much all my friends had a much harder road to get into it than I did. So I can't complain about that too much.
So being in the world of comics, have you seen it evolve since when you first got started to where you are now?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, it's the scene that I came up in is so much different than it is today for kind of younger people. I mean, it's I have to say it's so much easier for people to see your work now, because I debuted like long before the internet was a thing, and I should say that it's much easier to have your work be seen nowadays, but it's so much harder to get paid. That I mean, it was actually much easier to get paid back in the day. Like my first year out of school, I made really good money. Like it was like $24,000 in 1988 dollars is like 50 or something nowadays, and like nobody debuts with that kind of thing nowadays. But I mean, I don't envy young people nowadays, because I mean it's easier to be seen, but it's so much harder to get kind of like paying work. And like, I mean, like most comics people have to have a real job and do this in their spare time. And like, I've actually been lucky to have actually been a kind of full-time freelancer for pretty much most of my adult life. And like, but that's the kind of thing that the way I came up is not really that applicable for kind of young people nowadays. So, and they face so much harder issues in terms of like student debt. I've run into so many art students who have racked up sort of terrifying amounts of kind of student debt. That's like, I'm glad that wasn't an option back then, because the Cooper School was actually quite cheap at the time. Like, I don't know, it was like $5 to $7 grand a year, which is nothing compared to these kind of huge debt loads. But the thing is, on the other hand, nowadays you can learn so much online that really going to an actual art school, I think, is really an optional thing. And that I'm working with a Rob Porter, who's who's coloring some stuff for me, and will eventually be hopefully doing an empowered kind of guest one shot or the like for me. And Rob never went to art school at all. He learned everything he knows online, and he's a fantastic artist. I mean, he's much better than I am, and he didn't have to go to school and rack up these horrible student debts. That the options really are there. Like, you can learn so much online that in a way is a great thing for kind of young artists today. That kind of thing was impossible back in my day. So that is one advantage they do have. That I am somewhat envious of that, I have to say. But also there's so many more opportunities now. I mean, back in my day, you really had to self-publish, which was like a great way to lose a lot of money very quickly. So I mean, compared to like the webcomic scene, or just the webcomic scene, Patreons, Kickstarter. I mean, it's a difficult. I mean, it is a difficult field to support yourself in, but there are many more opportunities, like far more opportunities than there were back in my day. So that I mean, it's a challenge. It is a challenge, but I definitely feel that it's kind of broadened and diversified. There are more opportunities, though. It is still difficult, but it's like, I definitely do feel that there are many different roads you can take to get into comics nowadays, and it's not limited to getting work at Marvel or DC. In fact, some of the most successful people I know are like webcomic artists or people who are doing things through their own Patreon, who aren't like beholden to a big company editor for their lifestyle. And there's definitely that in a lot of ways it's really interesting, and I think it's a very, very kind of promising direction that comics are taking nowadays.
So kind of a fun question, what's your favorite character you've ever written or gotten to draw or even just read that isn't even yours?
Oh, that's a good question. I would probably have to say, stick to my own stuff, and I really would have to say kind of Emp, the Empowered, or Alyssa Megan Powers, the kind of lead character from Empowered, really is probably my favorite character of trying, because of a character kind of wrestling with sort of deep insecurities. She was kind of a I wrote Gen 13 about in the early 2000s, and the idea of a sort of insecure kind of modern superheroine kind of dealing with kind of real cultural issues, that was such an appealing concept to kind of take and kind of run with and Empowered. And she really is kind of I do actually enjoy it, and do enjoy writing and drawing her as kind of more than probably any other character.
And what else do you have coming up for us to look out for?
I should say that the latest volume of Empowered, Volume 9, comes out on August 19th, and that'll be hitting the shelves pretty shortly. And after that, I'm working on some other kind of special projects, including a possible Empowered crossover which I can't. We're still negotiating with a third party on that, but there should be some kind of intriguing stuff coming down the road next year, and I hope people will enjoy it.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
I'm Jamie, and you're watching ComicsVerse.